Welcome to Theology Curator, a podcast hosted by Kurt Willems and available online at theologycurator.com. Each episode looks at a theological, formational, or cultural theme. We might dig into the life and letters of a radical Jewish teacher named Paul, converse about a pressing contemporary issue, reflect on the nature of following Jesus today, or even attempt to remedy doom and gloom preaching with a good old-fashioned dose of hope. This show is an invitation to build bridges between the first century world of the earliest Christ followers into the 21st century reality we now inhabit. The Jesus we excavate from the rubble of tradition might just surprise us all.
Welcome back to Theology Curator. It's me, Kurt Willems, excited to be with you, and I'm very excited to get back into this episode and to some future episodes because, let me tell you, my book is written. It is written. Sounds very Jesus-y, that's weird, but you get what I'm saying. It is done. I have finished writing my final draft. The only thing left now is to do a copy edit phase. So they'll tell me, hey, these are inconsistent. Can you fix this? Or minor like cosmetic changes. But for the most part, it is done. And I am so excited. The book won't be here in the real world until March, but you know, March of 2021 will come hopefully sooner than we feel it will. Hopefully by then we have a vaccine for this virus and all kinds of different things are going well. So yeah, I'll have more to say about the book in upcoming episodes. And of course, in my newsletter, you can go to theologycurator.com/newsletter and sign up for my semi-regular newsletter that will become more regular here really soon, especially since this big writing project is off the table. So I'm really excited to be engaging there again soon and all throughout this podcast, of course. Today, I get to tell you something that I'm really excited about. It's a new interactive software called Biblingo. Biblingo is for those of you who want to either refine your own ability to read biblical languages like Greek and Hebrew, or for those of you who have never done biblical languages but want to. What I would compare this program to, it's kind of like a really cool version of, well, what is that software? You know, there's a few of them. Rosetta Stone's the one that comes to mind. Rosetta Stone was sort of this like immersive visual plus words plus engagement, right? It was like this whole immersive experience of learning language rather than just simply textbooks. Well, Biblingo takes all of those things on and so much more. And you're going to get to hear all about the new program. It's something, honestly, for the last decade, I've been saying, man, I wish they would make something like this. I wish we had this resource. Mostly for me at this point to stay in touch with the Greek I have learned and to help me refine it, you know? So if that's you, or if you're just curious about languages in general for this episode, it's going to be fun. It's really going to be fun. So I get to talk to the founder, one of the founders of Biblingo, and I'm just really pumped about doing that. His name is Kevin Grasso and is just a really cool guy to talk with. So hope you enjoy this conversation. And I should say one thing that I noticed my personal audio is a little off. It's not like nails on a chalkboard off, but it somehow didn't sync to my good mic and it recorded straight onto the computer. So you'll hear a little bit of a higher pitch version of the audio, I would guess, but honestly, it all came through just fine. And hopefully you enjoy this conversation. Let's step right into it. I want to welcome you back to the podcast and let you know that on the line right now is Kevin Grasso. He is the founder of a great piece of software that I personally believe is going to be a game changer in how people learn the biblical languages, called Biblingo. And we'll get into what that entails. But Kevin, what a privilege to be able to talk to you today. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing great. Thanks for having me, Kurt. I'm excited to chat.
Awesome, man. Me too. And a couple of things are in order. Congratulations are in order. I understand that you've got a little one that's about a week old now.
Yep, Emmett Joel Grasso is our first son. So we are pretty thrilled right now.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And you all are living in Jerusalem and you're pursuing PhD studies, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm at Hebrew University doing a PhD in Hebrew language. And I'm actually also doing an MA in comparative religion on kind of on the side.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm about done with my PhD, and I should finish up my MA next year. So
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm someone who holds an MA in comparative religion, so I know there's a lot of work that goes into that too. So very cool, very cool. Do you
yeah,
have an area of focus in your comparative religion studies?
yeah. So I the short answer is pistis, the Greek word for faith
Mm-hmm.
in Paul.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I've got some work coming out um, on that soon in publication, and basically going to turn that into a master's thesis. So that's the
Yeah.
plan.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah. It's a very, very important word. We've talked about it many times on this podcast. So we'll look forward to hearing your contribution to it in the future.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks.
yeah, absolutely. And so, background wise, how did you step into biblical scholarship? Like, what led you to that? And of course, that in some way must have given inspiration for this software that we're going to be talking about that I've already called a game changer. So, what's the backstory as far as your journey from I perhaps maybe a little bit of your faith background and how that may or may not inform your academic background?
Yeah, yeah. So honestly, I could probably spend the next 30 minutes talking about my background, but
Sure.
to make it short, I actually grew up Catholic. My mom is Catholic. My parents got divorced, and I was alternating between basically a non-denominational mega church one weekend with my dad, and then Catholic church with my mom, and really started exploring things for myself late high school years, and just started reading the scriptures on my own, and just yeah, was really just hungry for the word. God kind of just convicted me of sin and just made me realize like how much I needed Him, and just gave me this hunger. And since then has led me to all kinds of different churches, different belief systems, and through that I ended up eventually getting my MA in linguistics from Wycliffe School, called Graduate Institute of Applied Linguistics. It's now Dallas International University in Dallas. And so in linguistics for Bible translation. So I really had this sort of, well, really two motivations for this. One, I just really felt how precious God's word was, and just realized how terrible it would be if I didn't have the word in a language I could understand. And so that really led me to Bible translation. And at the same time, though, I've always been intensely interested in theology. And, I have read quite widely in theology, church history, those kinds of things. And so I realized that many of the theological arguments at the end of the day are grammatical arguments. Not all of them, but many of
Right.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and so I realized that you really do have to you have to learn Greek and Hebrew if you want to be a part of some of those conversations, and you also have to develop a theory for language. To figure out how language works in general. So that led me to linguistics. It led me to, Bible translation, and eventually it led me here to Israel, where, I'm doing my PhD in Hebrew, and I'm also, trying to couple that with gaining insights from, some of the cultural background, things you can learn really only in Israel. Some of it,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and yeah. So that's kind of the shortened version of how I ended up here.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting for sure. And so you, at the end of this journey, will have two MAs, a PhD, and a software. That's a lot
Correct.
to accomplish, plus having family and everything else you must be doing. So what a cool journey you've been on. So we talk about Biblingo, and I'm curious about. I mean, I think we have a sense of what inspired this idea, like in a maybe a general sense. But give us some more. What really inspired you to take all of these skills you've been developing and these passions and to put them into a computer software program?
Yeah. So, the biggest one, well, originally was this need I saw for it in the Bible translation world. So a lot of people don't really understand how Bible translation works today, but 99% of translations are done without, or they're not done from the original languages. So what happens is, so for example, I worked on a project in Mexico, and they were translating the Bible into a language called Nahuatl, and it's an Aztec language. And what they would do is they had this team of translators, and they would translate from Spanish. They would have a few different Spanish versions, and they would translate into Nahuatl, and then they would translate that back into English so that I could check that against the Hebrew.
Oh,
And so you're translating from a translation, and then you translate that again, and then you check that against the original.
wow.
And so it's this process that is completely standard in the Bible translation world, and people don't really realize it. But so my original motivation for it was just to make people like me in that process, basically to put them out of a job, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't want to have to check a translation of a translation of a translation. I want to give them the tools to make informed decisions by teaching them the biblical languages and the biblical world so that they can translate for themselves. And so that was really the original motivation. I mean, since then, I'm also like intensely interested in helping pastors, especially, those that don't have adequate resources. So we've talked to ETS in India, for example. And, there's people all over the world that just wouldn't have the opportunity, to learn Greek and Hebrew. Just another example is Chinese. It's to really access the textbooks, some of the grammar books. If you're Chinese, you'd have to learn English, right? So you have to learn English in order to start learning Greek and Hebrew. And so what we're trying to do with this is as much as possible allow for speakers of any language, of any background, to begin to learn the biblical languages.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I can imagine the frustration of so many translators being called upon to check the work of a translation of a translation of a translation.
Right.
And I mean, what an interesting path to get you to something that I think is going to make. I mean, I really think that seminaries across the world should adopt this as like a primary tool for their classroom environments. I mean, I think it would be crazy not to, as well as all of the people who don't go to school but have a passion for understanding scripture. Now they have something that they can do on their own as they carve out, 20 minutes a day or whatever it is they decide to carve out. So I think there's going to be this ripple effect beyond your original inspiration, and I think you're probably aware of this. That's going to be really beneficial to the broader body of Christ, as I know you care about. And so, as I think about this, uh, the best analogy I have is this thing is kind of like Rosetta Stone with biblical languages, but I know it's more than that. And I don't want to make a one for one correlation because there's been a lot of other types of immersive language experiences that have come up in the last decade or so beyond Rosetta Stone. And so I'm curious, talk to us about sort of the philosophy beyond the accessibility, but this is language immersion, culture immersion versus grammatical rules being the first step in a lot of ways. At least that's how I would understand it on the surface. How would you kind of unpack that for us?
Yeah, so that's something, we get asked a lot about. So I'll say that, all of these programs have inspired us. So Rosetta Stone. The big three, I would say, are Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, and LingQ. And they're all kind of, and Anki, actually. And so they're all kind of, built into the software more or less. So, the one thing, if you use Rosetta Stone, they use pictures, and the idea, right, is to, again, it's to kind of cut out the middleman of, the basically allowing you to learn the language without, using your mother tongue, right? So it gives you a picture, and it has the the word that you're trying to learn in that language, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, it's very much like Rosetta Stone. What we have built on and developed from something like Rosetta Stone is we've added videos. So one thing that Rosetta Stone kind of struggles with is verbs, right? How do I depict the difference even between something like jog and run, right? Those words are quite close in any way, but it's very hard to do it with a static picture, right? So you can only get so far. So we've tried to incorporate, we've got right now 1,400 or so of these videos, and we're gonna end up with around 2,500, and that's for both languages. The other thing that Rosetta Stone does is with these pictures is basically the pictures are going to be the same across a lot of different languages. And so what we're trying to do with the pictures and videos is also to teach the culture specific things that would reflect the first century world or 10th century BC world. So those are things that kind of make us different. The other thing is that we also want to provide as much flexibility to the user as possible. So we've tried to build in just ways that users can be in charge of how they learn. So as in addition, just giving users lots of practice. So this is what makes Duolingo so great, is you just have lots of practice with the language. And at the end of the day, if you're going to learn a language, you need practice. It's not like learning facts from a book. It's like learning a sport or learning to play an instrument, right? You have to practice every day, and then you just get better at it. And so we're trying to have this platform where anyone can sit down and they can just practice the language through just simple exercises where they're using the language actively. So in that sense, it's similar to something like Duolingo. And then the last kind of big inspiration was LingQ. So, and this is not out yet, and we anticipate it coming out in a couple months. But basically, there will be a tagged text of the Hebrew Bible or the Greek New Testament, and the software is keeping track of every word that the student knows. So basically what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to have like your own custom graded reader. So you'll be able to say something like, okay, give me a passage where I know 90% of the words. And then you can work through that passage, and the words that you don't know will be highlighted a different color. You can click on a word, you can see a picture or video for that word if we have it. A gloss, and then you can put that into a flashcard deck, and you can just practice learning that word. So the idea is that, again, we're giving people resources to where they can practice as much as they want of the language, and they can just, work their way through the text, and, eventually they can learn all the words in the Greek New Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, and learn to not just recognize them, but to actively produce them, which is really how you learn a language well.
Yeah.
So that's the really the short answer.
Yeah.
But those are
No,
the
that's super
inspirations.
helpful. Yeah. No, and I mean, I've got do you guys call it the beta version right now? Is that what you've released? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I have the beta version, and I've been working through a lesson, and I have to say, it is definitely, it's just so much better than any other tool I ever was exposed to in seminary or in my studies in at the University of Washington after that. Like, there's nothing like engaging with more senses that you're providing. I mean, it's just so good. And one of the things I quickly noticed, because I've been exposed to, there's different streams of thought, of course, on how to acquire the biblical languages. There's been some good folks who have come out with ways of using the language and actually talking. I think of Randall Booth. I think of Michael Holcomb, a couple of other people I've known that have really tried to use the verbal types of approaches to language immersion. But what's come out of that for me is an awareness of there's multiple dialects when you're talking about Greek, for instance, that
Mhm.
are taught. I mean, you can learn ancient Greek with a modern pronunciation in some situations. You can learn it with, the restored Randall Booth kind of approach to Koine. You can, I think you guys have 4 options. And so it's really fascinating that you all have kind of anticipated that in advance and are giving folks access to the stream that maybe someone like me who learned with Erasmian pronunciation, I can come in, still have that immersive experience, but not have to relearn all my diphthongs and some of these other nuances, right? So that's really fascinating. Was that just an anticipatory sort of thing that you did, or what was behind even saying we need to have options here?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just I know the field. I mean,
Right.
yeah, obviously, I mean, we've gotten so many questions about, which pronunciations do you have? And then, we tell them, I mean, particularly for Greek, people don't care as much for Hebrew for whatever reason. But yeah, we tell them, oh, there's 4 pronunciation options, and pretty much everyone is satisfied with that.
Yeah.
And it's been a ton of work to we have something like 7,000 audio files that we're dealing with. So it's been a lot of work, but it is the kind of thing, again, we're trying to provide students with as much flexibility as possible, to say, hey, whatever pronunciation system you want, take it. I mean, there's pros and cons to each of them. I think what's way more important than, choosing a particular pronunciation system is getting out and using it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've tried to do, say, okay, we're not gonna say, you have to use the restored Koine pronunciation. We're gonna say, you can do whatever you want, as long as you're in the language and using it as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, you pulled down a barrier for me, and I've been exposed to the restored approach, and I've tried to use some of the resources, and I just remember like getting frustrated because I'm like, I have to relearn all of these basics, and this is
Yeah.
not, I want to just immerse. And so you've kind of torn down that barrier, which is so good. And thinking about the software, I mean, I think that's essentially what you've done in general. There are good textbooks out there, no doubt. There's classic textbooks out there. I think of even Mounts is always being revised with new tricks to learn the grammar rules and all of that. And I think that's very valuable. However, with what you've done, I would be curious. Let's say I teach Greek 101 and 201 at my local seminary, and I really like Biblingo. What's a way that you could see this implemented in a classroom setting? Because of course, it can replace a classroom for some people, but if you're wanting graduate credits or whatever, how might this come alongside that process for someone in that scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've been talking a lot about this recently. You know, it a lot depends on the professor. So we've thought of several different kind of scenarios. So let's say so one of the things we've done in Biblingo is we also do have these grammar explanation videos done in English to acquaint you with the grammatical concepts. And some people in the communicative methodology world don't really like that. They want to say, okay, you'll just learn the grammar through immersion, and that's true to an extent, but you can actually learn it much faster if you're just told.
Yes,
and so
agree. I totally agree.
Right, and so we don't really want to waste your time trying to figure out whatever grammatical point it is. We'll just tell you up front, and then you go practice. And of course, you don't have to use that resource if you don't want. But so we can imagine a scenario, where some teacher says, "Hey, I really like Mounce's book. This is, the textbook that I've been using for 20 years. I don't really want to get rid of it." So for someone like that, and they say, I want to still teach the grammar with Mounce. So at the very least, what you could do with Biblingo is you could basically have, and we're coming out with this in a few weeks, what we're calling preset vocabulary decks. And so what it'll be is basically, we'll have all the words in Mounce, for example, according to chapter, all the vocabulary words that you would need to learn, and you can learn it through our software, right? Wow. So it'll, again, the advantage to software is it's tracking your answers. It's learning what words that you need practice with. What words you learned well, and then it's giving you the words that you need to work on more. So, and then obviously you're getting the audio, you're getting to produce the language, you're seeing a picture or a video. So all of those things, right, should at least, it should be very, very easy to incorporate something like that into a classroom setting, right? Just say for homework, hey, go learn the vocab with Biblingo. So we would see that as like, the bare minimum of how you could incorporate Biblingo. Obviously, though the advantage to the software is, are these videos, with the grammar points, and forcing you to learn or you to use the language. So, another scenario is basically using our sort of progression, right? So our vocabulary and our grammar sentences, and then just, taking your favorite textbook, Mounce or whoever, and using his grammatical explanations, right? And so it wouldn't be in the order of Mounce, but it would still be, you would get, his grammar explanations, and you would have Biblingo's order, and then, you would have the same sort of progression. Basically, when you work through, there'll be 52 lessons. When you work through all 52 lessons, you'll have over 1,000 vocab words. You'll know all the grammar you need to know to read the New Testament. Mm-hmm. So you end up in the same place, right?
Yeah.
So those are, kind of two scenarios that I could imagine. Obviously the other one, like you said, is you could just adopt Biblingo, and I think, for a lot of seminaries, I think that would make a lot of sense. A lot of people don't like to teach Greek and Hebrew 101. Mm-hmm. It's something, professors they've learned the alphabet how many times, right? They don't want to do totally. That again. So, I think it does make sense, in some cases just to say, hey, like, let's outsource this. Let's teach exegesis. Let's teach the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So that would be obviously the third scenario where seminaries could just adopt it.
Yeah. Wow. And I think that if you guys are able to pull off some sort of like, here's how these tools can work together, that's going to be really, really beautiful for the seminary professor who is like, no, I'm going to stick with mounts and test this thing out for a season. I mean, if you build that bridge, I think this thing's going to become so helpful. I imagine myself in seminary, I don't know when it was, maybe 12 years ago, trying to learn New Testament Greek, and I struggled. I am not, language has never been intuitive for me. I've had to work really hard to get at it. And I have always thought that if I had grammar alongside something like Biblingo, that there would be something more intuitive in how I was processing and learning, rather than feeling like I was doing vain repetition with flashcards or whatever in my hands, where no, there's immersion, there's video, there's interaction. You choose sort of what I need to know, and I click buttons, and it's just a different vibe. And so yeah, I think you will find a lot of success in that, and a lot of kingdom fruit because of that. And that's really cool. I didn't know you were even talking about that stuff, Kevin. So I'm really pumped about that too.
Yeah, me too. I'm just hoping it works. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple more questions and we'll kind of land here, but I'm curious. So how does one take linguistics and these ideas and turn it into software? I don't imagine that you also have a software engineering degree, but maybe you do. I don't know. So how did this all come together, like, practically?
Yeah, so I know nothing about software. Well, I do now, actually. Not having done this, I know a few things, but that's certainly not my area of expertise. So honestly, the linguistics has been very, very foundational in shaping, basically everything we're doing. So, there's so much, kind of built in. So I'll give an example. Right now we're trying to figure out a picture for the word sin, right?
Yeah.
So it's something like, how do we teach this to this sort of abstract concept to a student, right? And how do we create a visual aid that will help the student remember the word, right? So this is something that so particularly in linguistics, what I do is syntax and semantics. So I'm trying to figure out the meaning of words and how that correlates with the order of words, the syntax. So one thing about a concept like sin, right, is that it's there's no single event in the world that represents sin, right? It can be all kinds of different things, right? And so what we're trying to do, for example, with words like these is give the student multiple images of what might represent sin, and then we also have to think, okay, how does this contrast with something like transgression, right? So how do we give a depiction of sin that's different than transgression? Because we know that there is a difference between the two words. They're synonyms, right? But they're not the same.
Yeah.
And so thinking linguistically about it, they often refer to the same event, but they still have a different meaning. And so what we have to do is try to figure out what makes sin different than transgression, and then try to put that in a picture. So as an example is sin is against God, right? And that's actually in the Gospels. Who can forgive sin but God alone? Why? Because sin is against God. And so it's not just that wrongdoing happens, it's that wrongdoing happens and it is against God. Whereas transgression is actually the same kind of wrongdoing, but it's against a some sort of norm, whether it's a law or whatever. So with that understanding of this quite subtle distinction, now we're going to put that into a picture or a graphic so that the student can see this subtle distinction, and hopefully learn something about the difference between these two words, right? So all of this is pretty. It's actually quite difficult, like from a semantics perspective, to kind of draw these sorts of distinctions. And then what we have to do is, we have to put it in, a package that's easy for the student to digest, right? So they're not gonna, do the whole semantic analysis of these kinds of different words. What we want to do is just say, hey, this is what it is. Go learn it, right? So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but those are some of the things that how linguistics has been informing this whole process.
Yeah. So then software engineers have to say, okay, we hear you. We hear your nuanced linguistic thing. So what if we do this? Or how do we? Yeah, it sounds like it would really have to be quite the partnership in a lot of ways.
So another kind of like example of this and what makes us different than Rosetta Stone, for example, is there are lots of words that have what's called content. So either nouns or verbs. So something like the verb say, right? There's content to it, and in English you can normally tell with the you have a complement, what's called a complementizer, the word that. He said that his wife went to the store, right? And so there's actually two events happening there. And so this is something that we've built into Biblingo is we actually have two videos or pictures for sentences like this, and a relationship between them. In this case, it would be a quote marks marking the like say relationship. So there's all kinds of different sorts of linguistic expressions that we use. Command, say. All kinds of different ones that have content associated with them, right? And the only difference is the relationship between the two events. And so what we've done is that's what you see in the software is you'll have someone saying something. A quote mark, and then you'll have another video of the thing that's being said, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing again, where, you were trying to wed as much as possible this sort of deep linguistic theory with intuitive UI experience.
Wow. That is a big task, and it sounds like you're really pulling it off in a really important way. So I just want to enthusiastically say how much I support this process that you've all gone through to create this product, and really believe that it's going to be helpful and life-changing for some folks. And now it is available in the beta version. I think you're going to have a full launch in the near future. When do you have like a full launch, or how are you processing that?
Yeah, so right now we're, like you said, we have a beta version that we're getting the kinks out of. We're hoping, so by the end of May or so, we're hoping to have basically the first 26 lessons and the basic structure the way we want it. So in that sense, it won't be so much of a beta anymore. It'll just be like an incomplete version of the finished product. But we're hoping that the finished product will come out, sometime in July or August. Basically in time for the school year. So so students could start in schools could start using the program. Basically it'll include 52 lessons. The idea is one per week. That'll take you through all the grammar. It'll be just over 1,000 vocab words. It'll be about 1,500 sentences, all paired with videos. And then it'll be the Bible reading side with the fully tagged text that's keeping track of the words and basically like a customized graded reader, and then a flashcard module. So that's the core of what we're doing and what we plan to release in July or August.
Wow, that's so cool. And I love that there's 52 lessons. It's 1 year straight. So if someone were anticipating how much of a week one of those lessons would take up, what do you anticipate on average that going through one of those 52 lessons will take? How much time should someone carve out of their schedule?
Yeah, so it does depend on, and this is what we're finding with our beta users, quite a bit on background. So, I would say if someone, is coming into it with zero background, you can anticipate, a couple hours worth of material for the lessons. I mean, really though, like what the mindset should be, right, is you don't just do a lesson and then say I've learned it, I'm done, right? You do a lesson and it was good practice and you need to go practice again, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's like if I'm learning to play an instrument, I don't play one song only once and say I've learned that song, I'm done with it. But I do think if someone said, okay, I'm going to put 2 hours a week into this, by the end of the year, they'd be done with the 52 lessons and they'd be reading the New Testament or the Old Testament in the original.
Wow. I mean, that's really not a huge commitment. I mean, it's a commitment because you're giving yourself to the process, but 2 hours, that is actually pretty a manageable chunk, I think, for folks. And so hopefully those who desire to take this thing on will really do that. And tell us a little bit about how we can sign up for Biblingo, and also tie into that. This is something I wanted to ask and forgot to earlier. Platform. How can folks expect to be using this? Right now, I know it's an online platform. So what are some of those things going to look like as far as user spaces, but then also how do they find out more, and what are next steps if they're interested?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to go to our website, biblingo.org, and just check out our page. You can see our pricing. You can see more about the software. You can also just email me at kevin@biblingo.org if you have any questions. And yeah, so what we anticipate, about the future. So right now it is a web app. So, you can, in theory, you can use it on any device. And as long as you have internet. We are working on, or we will start working on a mobile app. That will depend on, how quickly we can get the web app done and all kinds of other things. But we're hoping to get started on that sometime this year, and kind of launch that early next year. And the other thing that we're hoping to do is create a desktop version from the web app that would function in the same way, but just for people that might not have as good an internet connection or whatever. So those are the three kind of platforms that we would see users using it in. But for right now, it's a web app. So if you have internet, it should be fine to be used on that.
Wow, this is really exciting stuff, and I look forward to hearing about how folks are connecting with the software and ultimately to the biblical languages and Jesus himself. And thank you so much, Kevin, for the hard work you're putting into this and the real, I believe, real tangible gift you're giving to the body of Christ as we seek to know and understand Scripture with greater depth and greater transformation.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the encouragement. And that is, at the end of the day, that is my hope. It's just that God's kingdom would advance in the world through, a greater knowledge of him and more passionate love for him. So I really appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to see what happens.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks again. And we'll hopefully hear more about Biblingo in the future. And I'll definitely keep people afloat as I track with your progress and whatnot, because I just think it's great stuff. So thanks again, Kevin.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed that interview, that conversation. It was really fun to talk with Kevin, and I wanted to let you know about something they're doing. If you go to biblingo.org, and by the way, Biblingo, it's pretty much what it sounds like, Biblingo, biblingo.org, and you can check out the plans they have and the resources. You can even sample the software for, I think it's 10 days. So give it a shot, test drive it, see what it does. I mean, it's, in my opinion, a game changer. And if you end up liking it, you have a discount through this podcast. And all you got to do is write Theology Curator in all caps in the discount code box as you choose your subscription, and then go from there. So at this point, they have subscription models at various levels for various types of goals you may have, and it's affordable for a lot of people, and I just think it's a great resource. So go check that out. And my friends, I hope you have a great rest of your day, a great week. I pray that you are keeping healthy and safe and finding peace in the midst of a lot of stuff happening in our world right now. And I just pray that you will continue to seek Jesus in your own way and discover how his humanity can become more and more your own. Go in peace, my friends. Until the next time.
Thanks for listening to Theology Curator. For more resources from Kurt Willems, check out theologycurator.com/newsletter to sign up for our email update list. For new listeners of the podcast, we hope you will subscribe via iTunes, Google, or your podcast manager of choice. If you like what you hear, please leave the show a review. For regular listeners, consider supporting Kurt's online ministry at patreon.com/Kurt Willems. Lastly, please don't let this conversation end when the episode is over. We hope you feel empowered in regular life to explore theology and faith in intelligent and humanizing ways.